Hi, folks. Sorry for the delay, but the anticipation makes it even better, doesn't it? Thanks, folks. I'm Bob Coates. I'm the Governor's Census Liaison in North Carolina, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Municipal Boundaries Project coming out of the GICC. So as one of my titles implies, working with boundaries is an important part of interaction with the U.S. Census Bureau. That conversation in combination of conversations with other state agencies and kind of the normal way boundary information is collected kind of highlighted some issues within the state of North Carolina. And the GICC, through the Municipal Boundaries Working Group, has kind of addressed those issues. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, first of all, behold the nugget. That's my new grandson right there. Pretty proud of the guy, so I use him at every opportunity to get him out in front of everybody. But he's actually a great segue about municipal boundaries because the little guy is growing by leaps and bounds. There's a lot of changes going on with him. North Carolina is the fourth fastest growing state in the nation, so we're seeing a lot of growth, a lot of changes in our municipal boundaries as well. Also, like the nugget, his poor parents are getting phone calls, emails, text messages all the time saying, what's he doing now? What's he doing now? What's he doing now? You folks with the local governments are getting phone calls from state government agencies, from the U.S. Census Bureau, from federal agencies saying, how have your boundaries changed? How have your boundaries changed? How have your boundaries changed? Y'all have a lot of work to do locally. Just like his parents have a lot of work to do at home, they don't really have the time to be answering the same question a dozen times a day. So their solution has been to use Snapchat to send out all this information to the whole family, and that works great. So kind of what we're looking at for the Municipal Boundaries Project is a way that we can come up with a process that seamlessly fits into what you're doing at the local level, that collects this information that you're doing as part of your normal business processes and creates an authoritative municipal boundary layer for the state of North Carolina that can be used by the greatest common denominator of stakeholders possible, whether that's at the state level or the federal level. So thanks, Nugget, for being a great segue, but that's really the background of what the Municipal Boundaries Project is intended to do. So how did we get there? Well, a few years back, we began this conversation. As I said, we began talking within state government about how many agencies, which stakeholders are asking for this information on municipal boundary changes to do your normal business. So these are the people that are blowing your phones up, that are blowing up your email, asking the same information. We had originally about 25 folks that started the process, but that grew over time. So you'll see here stakeholders from emergency management, from revenue, from NCDOT, the state demographer's office. All these folks have needs to understand what municipal boundaries are. So from that conversation, we got into asking the stakeholders, what is it about the boundaries that you really need? What's the greatest common denominator of information that you're looking for? Yes, the boundary information, but what are the attributes? What are the features that you really need for those boundaries? And based on that interaction, as well as growing interaction from folks like the League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners, we were able to come up with what we thought was the biggest kind of common ground that we could find for municipal boundary information. The fine folks at NCDIT and the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis developed a prototype tool to collect that information, and we set up a test group, a trial pool, and we asked those folks to try this tool out. Does this make sense to you? Does this work? Does it not work? What feedback do you have with it for us? That happened in 2021. It was pretty successful, and since then we've been expanding the use of the tool. So we're expanding it so much that today we want everybody using it, everybody trying to use it. So don't wait to be invited. This is your invitation collectively right now. So going forward, please check out the Municipal Boundaries tool. Make sure that your information, your contact information is in there, and we're going to cover all of this in a little bit more. But the tool is open for business right now. We want to see how well it works. We want to hear your feedback on what's working, what's not working. We want to see if you can break it. So use the tool to check on your information and make sure that we have somebody to talk to if that information is not correct. So that's the appeal that's going out to y'all right now. So since no good government presentation is worthwhile if it doesn't have a flow chart, here's the obligatory flow chart. So this is the process that we kind of worked out within the working group. What I want everyone to realize here is that you see the inputs are in the green areas here. So the municipal, the local government's feeding up into the county. No authority is being taken away from local governments at all. Your boundaries are your boundaries. As your boundaries change through local annexation, de-annexation, as you're normally reporting that information, this process is simply intended to collect the information that you're normally reporting. If there are, and you see there's a number of quality check processes in the overall flow of things, that's why we're asking for your contact information through the tool itself. So if we get information that comes in from the municipality, we have contact information for that local partner, we get information from the county. If there's some disagreement there, we know who to talk to work through the processes. At no point in there do you see the state of North Carolina saying, nope, your boundaries are now this. So your boundaries are only what you report to us. However, if you don't report any boundaries to us or if you don't verify any boundaries, we're going to have to make do with what we have. So as part of this process, we created a baseline layer product that was based as much as possible on the NCDOT data, as complete as that could be. But where there were gaps, we filled it in with Census Bureau data or other sources of data, which is why the first thing we're asking you to do is provide your contact information, but also verify the information that we have for your area. Is that accurate? So from here, we have, there's the link to the actual tool itself, so you can go there right now. You still have to listen to me and all the rest of the fine folks who are going to come after me. But you can go into this site right now and put in your contact information, and Colleen would be very happy to have it. Also, we want you, while you're in there and you put in your information, take a look at your boundaries and make sure that they look correct to you. If they're not, you can absolutely let us know. If you have questions, that's why we're here today talking to you folks about the tool and the overall process. But if after maybe this weekend when you're sitting at home watching ACC basketball and pondering municipal boundaries, if you have a question, you've got my email address, and Colleen and I are the co-heads of the working group. Please reach out to us. We want this to be a success for everyone. So with that being said, that's enough PowerPoint, which is also a requirement for government presentations. We can go into a live demo of the actual tool. So, not yet. There we go. So this is the municipal boundary site. If you're familiar with the Center for Geographic Information Analysis and especially the NC One Map tool, on the top tier of the NC One Map tool, there is a, see if I can read it from here. Yeah, data projects. So if you click on that data project from the NC One Map home, you can see if you scroll down, municipal boundaries is there. So if you click on that, oh, it's got a monitor right here, fantastic. If you click on that, you'll come to this site. The first thing you see is an introduction, which is really what we've talked about up to this point, the reason that we're trying to create this process and establish an authoritative municipal boundary layer for North Carolina. You'll see some of the initial folks who bought into this process. It's not everybody, but these were folks who were in on the ground floor. And I do want to point out some of the things you'll see there. You see the U.S. Census Bureau's boundary annexation survey. Anybody familiar with that? A few folks, it's going on right now. The non-response follow-up is happening right now. When this process is fully fleshed out and when we get everyone participating and on board, this tool will respond to that for you. So you won't have to respond to the boundary annexation survey each year. This tool will just give that information to the U.S. Census Bureau. Likewise, for all the other folks that have been contacting you, this resource will answer the bulk of those questions. In the meantime, keep doing them. Okay, so do your boundary annexation survey, respond to the other calls that you get until this is fully in place. It's not there yet. The other thing I do want to point out is while this is intended to be the largest common denominator, it's not going to answer every question that a lot of your stakeholders have, but they might not ask you as much data. They may ask you for little bits and pieces, but you won't be getting as much duplication of effort. So if we scroll down a little bit more after the introduction, you actually see the get started, and this is where we actually do the work. Below the Get Started area, you'll find frequently asked questions. So this is going to be a little guide towards answering some of your more basic questions. And that's followed up with some contact links for getting to folks at CTIA or to my office or any of the development team on this that may be able to help answer your questions. But let's actually take a look at the tool itself and see how it functions. So if we can scroll up a little bit, we have two options, step one, step two. We're going to start with step one. So that's going to review and approve the boundaries for an area. So as it loads up, you'll see kind of a paned layout. The top pane is going to be your navigation area. You also have a scrollable map right below that. You can scroll the map if that's easier for you. And then off to the other side is the forms area. That's where you're actually going to input your information. So you'll notice up at the navigation area, we clicked step one, and that's to approve our boundaries. If you wanted to click on step two, you can do that. But the point being here is you can switch between all three of those steps once you're within the viewer. So we're going to start off with approve boundaries and stay there. The next three buttons that are right next to it are the buttons that we just saw on the homepage. It's a link back to the homepage. It's help and the frequently asked questions information. But let's go ahead and take a look at walking through a process. So you'll notice that it's an alphabetical layout. So we started off with the Alamance County areas shown here, but there's also at the very, very top a search area. It says city or county name. My last name is Coates. There's another Coates who's going to talk to you, so we're going to look for the town of Coates. So if we type in Coats and then search, so now you see our options are Coates, the town in Harnett County, or Coates extraterritorial jurisdiction in Harnett County. So as that lets you know, you can actually verify both. So let's click on the town of Coates, and the map will redraw, we'll zoom into the area. You see both. We've said that we wanted to see the town, so that's what gets selected, but the ETJ is there as well. So the very first thing we want everybody to do, this is a 24/7 shop. You can do this at any time. So when you're watching ACC basketball, you can verify your boundaries if you want to. If you do nothing more right now, click on the add record on the right-hand side under approval and enter your approver name, approver title, approval email address, and your signature. This is the person that we need to contact in your area if we have questions about, if we see something that doesn't make sense to us and we need a question answered, this is who we contact. Now we know that every shop is going to do their job in a different way. So if you have one point person that has a generic email, that's fine. If you've got a team of folks who work on this, you can input as many people as you want to notify for that jurisdiction. The point being is that we have somebody to talk to. We know turnover happens. Sometimes it's hard to make sure that a new person on the job knows that they're supposed to stay in touch with this. So just make sure that we have some reliable contact information for your jurisdiction. That's just job one. Make sure that we know somebody to talk to and that you know that this resource is out there. So if you do that right away. But if you do have extra time to actually verify your boundaries, you're looking at the boundary of Coates here. You can zoom in on it. You have the same functionality that you would in any map viewer. If everything looks good to you, you can go in and put in today's date or the date that you're looking at it. You can enter your approver name. You'll notice that there are red asterisks there. Those are required fields. Your approver title, email, you sign off, and then you click the approval button at the bottom, and that's it. So if everything looks good to you, sign off on it, and you're done. I'd really encourage everybody to make this a regular part of your business practices. So if you have a staff meeting once a month, it's probably not unreasonable, especially if you're in a larger jurisdiction that's seeing a lot of changes, to take a look at these boundaries at least once a month and make sure everything looks right. And just do it as part of your normal process. If you do have an annexation, if you do have a boundary change, you absolutely want to go through this and make sure that your information is added. So if you're just reviewing and signing off on things, if everything looks good, you're done. That's all there is to it. So if we look at the upper left-hand corner, we see that we can also submit an annexation. So what if we do have a boundary change? What if we do have an annexation? How do we submit that information? So click on the button, please. We were just looking at Coates, and it's still there. But I mentioned that North Carolina is the fourth fastest growing state in the nation. We actually had some cities and towns that had almost a 90% growth over the decade. One of those is the town of Fontana Dam. So let's take a look at that. In the search window, if we'll start searching for Fontana, not Montana, sorry. F-O-N. Back, all the way to the beginning. F as in Frank, O-N-T-A, there it is, Fontana Dam. And go ahead and leave. It's remembering that we were in the submission process. Okay, so there's Fontana Dam. Fontana Dam was a town of 7, and it annexed 6 people. So that's where its huge population growth came from. So it wasn't that people were flooding into the area, they just annexed. So taking a look at Fontana Dam here, saying that we're in beautiful Graham County now, say these folks look over and they see that development to the west, and they want to annex that area, or there's been an annexation. So this is the screen to do that on. And you see the functionality looks very similar to what we just saw in approving everything. Over on the annexation information, we have to click that plus again to actually open the form. Right there, perfect. Yep. Now, we're asking for more information here because there's more information involved with doing an annexation. So we need the date that you're submitting the information. And again, these have the red asterisks there. So you're going to be prompted, you're going to be required to input this information. The effective date of the annexation. The date the ordinance was adopted by the local authority. The ordinance number is required. If we scroll down a little bit, there's who prepared this file, and that gives you a couple of options. Is it a city official? Is it a county official? Is it a regional organization like a council of government? Did they help prepare the underlying geospatial information that you're submitting? Did you hire a consultant, either at the county level or the city level? So the point being is, whatever your capacity point is, whoever's doing the work on producing the information to document the annexation, that person can submit the information. So you pick the person. That person needs to be identified by their name, their title, and their contact information, just like we asked you to do if everything looked great. And the point behind this is we need to know who to talk to if there's an issue with the information. So scrolling down a little bit, we actually need a copy of the ordinance. We need the attached GIS annexation information. That can be a shapefile or a geodatabase of the annexation. Scrolling down a little bit more, if there's any additional documentation you want to provide, we also do need a survey of the annexation. All of those can just be attached. Drag and drop right on that part and you're done. Any other documentation that you care to attach, you can do that as well. If you have the additional information about the name locally used to reference the annexation, deed book page, the date it was recorded, map or plat book for the page. If a county is submitting this for your local government, they're going to have that information. But if you don't at the local level, that's okay. That's why it's not asterisk there. We can get to it. But the things with the asterisk we do require. Report the amount of acreage that's involved with the annexation. And then at the very bottom, there's a tab here. If you are de-annexing an area, this is the tool to use for that, this step. So for annexing or de-annexing, use the same tool. So at the bottom, you'll see the area to be removed from municipality. That's where you would include that information. And then you click the Submit Annexation button at the bottom, and you're done. Only use this step if you're doing an annexation or de-annexation. The next step that we're going to be talking about is if you did that review of your boundaries and you notice that things weren't right, but you're not doing an annexation, you're just correcting an incorrect boundary, that's when you use the next step. But don't use the correct a boundary area to record an annexation. So for annexation or de-annexation, use this step only, please. Thank you. Okay, so with that teaser about, well, what if we're not doing an annexation, but during the ACC tournament, we took a look at our boundaries and things ain't right. How do we fix that? That's where we go to the Submit Boundary Corrections, the last option that's there. So we'll click that. Things will churn for a little bit. Again, North Carolina, one of the oldest states and one of the best. So if we have a lot of older cities and towns here. Some of those you may say, we haven't had a boundary change in a coon's age. That's fine. But it doesn't mean that the boundaries that we have listed for your area are correct. The technology for doing maps, especially with boundary annexation survey, used to be done with big paper maps and colored pencils. folks did the best job that they could, but technologies have changed. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up the quality of our data going forward. So if we're going to submit a boundary correction here, let's look at an old town like Manteo. So we'll clear out Fontana, we'll go to Manteo. Manteo. There we go. And we're going to leave that. Well, there we go. Okay, so there's Manteo. Now you'll notice on the side where the form shows up, there's a yellow bar that says, please don't use this area to submit an annexation. That's the subtle reminder I just gave you. This is only for doing a correction. So the folks at Manteo look at their boundary and they're like, well, that looks pretty good, but there's a gap there at the bottom of the inlet, at the bottom of the bay. That gap should actually be included in our municipal boundary, and it's not. It was brought into the municipal boundaries in 1790, sometime way back. So it's not a new annexation, it's just an incorrect boundary. So we need to correct that. So when we've identified that area, just like with the other functionality, we come over, we click the plus under boundary correction. Since there's no ordinance or anything tied to this, so this input area is kind of a hybrid of verifying your boundary and annexing your boundary. So you have the choice here of either correcting the municipal boundary or your ETJ. That's what the first pull down is. So if we click on that, you'll see you get to pick which one you're correcting. So we'll stick with the municipal boundary. And then the next item that we have is the reason for the update. So just give us a quick explanation. Just an incorrect boundary. What you have here is not correct with what we have on our records. And then you have which organizations, that's going to look familiar. That's the same thing that we saw during the annexation area. Which organization is submitting this information? Who found the problem and who should we talk to at that organization to correct this? Underneath that, it's the same information. The name, the contact information, the date that you're submitting this, a file of the corrected boundary, and then you click the button at the bottom and you're done. So we hope that this is a very simple, a very straightforward process. Again, what you're doing is providing the best information you have locally. We have a quality control process on our end that's going to compare that with other data that we're getting. If we find things that don't agree, we're going to come back and talk to you folks. That's sort of the view, high-level view of how the process is intended to function. But to test that, we need your input, we need your participation. So that's the quick overview. I'm going to be joined now by the rest of the panel, and we'll dive deeper into the nuts and bolts of the tool.
So while the panel's coming up here, we probably have time for at least one question for Bob, if you'd like to ask that now. We'll have a little bit of time after the panel also. Any questions? Mm-hmm. We prefer the entire municipality. Yeah, whatever you have is the most. Well, if you go in there and it's wrong to begin with, go ahead and submit a new one, and then we'll contact you when we have the new one up there, and you can go in and approve it. Okay, so first of all, we'll get started with our panel here, and the first question I'm going to ask them is to tell us who they are, who they work for, and how they got involved in the municipal boundary working group. So Bob already went, so we'll start from that end and go down.
All right, my name's Rich Elkins. I'm the director of the Land Records Management Program at the Secretary of State's office. And I'll be presenting at the end here, so I won't get into too much detail. But all annexations are required to be filed with the Secretary of State, and that comes to our office. And we are also the state certification entity that once you submit things to the BAS, Census Bureau is going to send them to us for us to confirm that, yes, you filed them correctly with us and things were done legally. So before it gets added, it's got to go through our approval first.
Hi, I'm Mike Klein. I'm the state demographer, work in the budget office with Bob. And so I do the population estimates for all municipalities and counties. And part of that, part of my legislative mandate is to estimate the population. Typically, we're estimating a year behind for data reasons, but our certified estimates include anything that has been annexed in your municipality within the last fiscal year. So the most updated annexations, boundaries have been important for my population estimates, and that's how I got involved with this. Right now, I survey all municipalities and counties every year, asking municipalities to submit annexations. It's not really a GIS, it's more of a tabular data where I'm asking acreages, ordinances, date of ordinance, a lot of the same questions that are in the municipality boundary, but kind of be able to use this in a different way than we've done in the past. So.
Hi, my name is Steve Averett. I work for the city of Greensboro in their IT department. I represent the League of Municipalities on the Geographic Information Coordinating Council, the Local Government Committee, and the Statewide Mapping Advisory Committee. So my role in this is to represent municipal interests as we develop these tools to try to work toward a greater good.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Alan Coates, and I'm a GIS analyst with North Carolina Emergency Management. I got involved with this in 2021 when I developed the baseline municipal boundaries layer that is being used in the tool right now. Since that time, I've made a couple of updates to it. So that's how I've been involved.
Okay, so the next question is, some of you have already answered this, so you can skip over if you have, but how are municipal boundaries important to your organization? How are you using them?
Well, as Mike pointed out, in our office, in the Office of State Budget and Management, the geospatial information that comes out from the census, and you heard Rich mention the boundary annexation survey. So local governments can do boundary changes, as you need to. But if those aren't properly recorded with Rich and the Secretary of State's office, they can't certify them, which means the Census Bureau can't use them, which means you don't get data for your area that's accurate. And it means that you miss out on the roughly $2,000 per person per year in federal funds that come back to your community based on the census numbers. So we want to get to a process where we know that your local governments are getting the right data that you need, and more importantly, you're getting the right funding that you need to do your jobs. So from our perspective, we looked at a large number of stakeholders that were trying to get to the same data, but that data wasn't being captured efficiently. It was putting a lot of extra work on you, and that inefficiency was leading to inefficient data, inaccurate data that was hurting your bottom line. So that's really, from my standpoint, where we started this conversation is how can we improve this and how can we get you guys the resources that you need?
I kind of already answered.
I kind of already answered, but I'll just add to it. So Census Bureau does annual population estimates, and those, as Bob mentioned, are used for formula funding for federal money. My state estimates do the same for state monies. The PAL bill, DOT is the biggest one, but some of the DOR sales tax distributions are also based partly on my population estimates. So it's important to have that most recent annexation data. The difference between the Census Bureaus, their reference date on population estimates is always mid-year, July 1st, just like ours. Geographically, they're always looking at, just because of their processes, January 1st of the estimate year, versus mine is July 1st of the estimate year for standard estimates, and the certified estimates include anything that's been annexed within the last fiscal year.
I'll just echo what Bob said. It's important for the municipalities to receive the funding that they're due based on population growth. Greensboro in particular has been one of the fastest growing cities. We had a record number of annexations in 2022 and are well on our way to exceeding that and having a new record for 2023.
So like a lot of agencies, emergency management has a number of applications that use the municipal boundaries layer as base data. So we want our users to be able to have the most up-to-date, accurate information that we can give them. Along those same lines, as we work with the floodplain mapping program, which is part of our agency, we need to be able to understand how jurisdictions are going to be impacted by those flood hazard areas all across the state. So that's just one example.
Okay, so last one, and then we'll open this up to some questions from the audience. How do you think that this tool will make your life easier in the future?
Well, just to be crass, I've got 30 years, so my life's going to get easier soon, I hope. I do have to say, the folks who put this conference on, the folks at NCDIT, and especially the folks at the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, have done a huge amount of great work of improving the geospatial resources for North Carolina. The municipal layer is a part of that. So how those municipal layers function with the seamless parcel layers that they put together and function with the address layers, that's going to help us out the next time we have a severe storm event, next time a hurricane hits, and we need to know where people are and how to get to them. As we've already mentioned, getting the dollars and cents that are on the table back to the communities that need them, that's a year-to-year budget situation. We want that to be accurate. But we've been around enough to know that good data means that when bad times hit, we're better able to deal with them. And that's where I see this going, and I'm excited about that.
In our office, we don't really deal as much with that spatial data, but all the other information, because of the boundary and annexation survey, we're trying to look at a way of getting this all together and having, not only is it fewer things for you to respond to, but it's fewer things for us to have to reach out to you again and asking for information or corrected things. I think people who work in local government would really benefit from hearing Steve. Steve has voiced some really great things that he's looking forward to with this.
So yeah, as the representative for the League of Municipalities, one of our goals in this is to create something that creates some efficiency and ease of use. Cities are constantly being asked to do more tasks with less resources. Obviously, this information is critical at the state for emergency management, for funding, or for demographics and board of elections. And I think I've been in local government for 27 years, and a lot of tasks like updating these municipal updates, annexations to the state have been done the same way for decades. And I think the development of this tool gives us an opportunity to rethink our business process and rethink who should be doing what and how this process should be handled and how the data should be moved on. So I'm really proud of this tool. I think it's going to help modernize a lot of our efforts across the cities and make it easier for city staff. And ultimately, that's what I want out of this, is to make it easy for our staff to get the state what they need, and in turn get the resources that we need back from the funding. So.
No, that's good input because I think that's an important thing, is to hear from municipalities. From my standpoint, I think there's going to be some shifting in the way we do our work in terms of estimation, and it's because we're so much more data rich than we were before, and I think this is going to add to that. It also creates more authoritative, because a lot of times it's reported to me in terms of annexations and my annual surveys doesn't always match up with what's been reported to Rich, which does not always match up with what's reported to the Census Bureau Bass, which is not the same as been reported to DOT. And so when you do all those comparisons in the past, they haven't always matched up. And I think this is going to give us one resource that we can depend on and rely on and say, this is the authoritative resource. So I think that's a good thing. Long term, I can see this where I'm not necessarily surveying every year, because I do collect in some information on building activities. A lot of times people annex something this year. 3 years down the road is when they actually start building housing units on those annexations. So I'm still asking that in terms of my survey for older annexations, and that goes into my estimation processes. long-term, I can see being able to use this tool, these data, as well as the data pulled in from Alan's resources, looking at building footprints and building permit activity and housing units and addresses and all that. So hopefully it, long-term, be able to use that data to do some more localized estimations in the future.
Yeah, I'll just agree with what others have said. As an agency that uses these data, it's a great benefit to have direct feedback from the municipalities. In the past, like many others, we've had our own data set that we've updated, but of course it takes time. There may be long spans of time between the last time you were able to update it, and there can be, just gaps or incomplete information that you're able to gather. So again, having this and having as much information as possible directly from the municipalities is going to be very useful to us.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the panel or for Bob or anyone up here? Yeah, so the,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an actual survey, but a survey type map. So when you're taking that legal description and placing it on, what isn't appropriate is just something printed out from your website, GIS, here's a copy of the parcel, and doesn't have any of that, the meets and bounds information on it. The statute requires you to submit an accurate map. And when you've got a map that specifically has a disclaimer on it saying that this is not an accurate map and you need to consult the source documents, that's something that we feel is generally not an appropriate submission for that. But what you're doing with those legal descriptions is. Ideally, what we want to see is the recorded copy, because then we know that it has been recorded at the Register of Deeds. Because that's one of they're required to be recorded at the Register of Deeds and submitted to the Secretary of State. So if we get one that already has the recording information from the Register of Deeds, then that tells us, okay, they've already done that. So it may be something where you need to look at where in the process that the actual information gets uploaded and how you get that information from the clerk or whoever's doing that recording. Because if they give you the book and page information, then you've got it and you can pull it up and upload it. Or it can be part of your process that once they've recorded it and have received that recorded copy, they provide that to you to be uploaded.
I think we have time for one more question. Kalpana?
So thank you so much for the tool. I think it's really useful. I work with public guidance in emergency management, and we use a lot of people's public data from the county.
So we've been doing outreach to try and get people to submit. We've had submittals, and during the process, we've been looking at what we're getting and reevaluating how we go about it. We're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. This is a public resource right now. There's a REST endpoint listed in the frequently asked questions, so you all can actually pull it into your own GIS maps and look at it against your local data. And that's the intent, is that this is where we push the state government agencies who need the data, who may have been asking you for it in the past. So the more local municipalities that we can get to approve their data so that we know that what Alan put together is really right, that's going to give us the confidence that we all need to be able to use this as our one resource. Did I answer your question? Okay. All right, thank you. And now we will switch this over to Rich Elkins to talk about the maintaining an annexation history using GIS. And I will also say that one of the benefits of this is it maintains your annexation history, because you will be able to see the annexation areas on the map.
All right. Hi again. My name's Rich Elkins again. I'm the director of the Land Records Management Program. And I wanted to talk about one of the things, when you're creating the data that you're going to be uploading to this, you're creating an actual, just a polygon of what is being annexed when you're submitting the annexation. But when you're done with that, are you just merging it in with the rest of your city limits? Well, if you're doing that, you're losing really valuable data that can be useful. And this is what I wanted to talk about here, is using that you can actually use it to maintain your annexation history. So just kind of off, I mentioned in the panel, and I'm not going to read a statute here, but the general statute, when it talks about annexation and what it requires, and it requires that an accurate map of that territory, along with the ordinance, to be recorded at the Register of Deeds and with the Secretary of State, and that it has to be reported to the Boundary and Annexation Survey of the U.S. Census Bureau. Hopefully, at some point, once this is up and running, the state is going to already have that data, and instead of you each having to submit 500 some different municipal things, or where you have a consolidated BAS and the county is doing it for the cities, 100 different ones, we're already collecting that data. So rather than having to do the process again, we've got it, let's just send it, kind of thing. All right, so, you may not have been doing this already, but it's not too late to start. And I wanted to go over some things that we used when I worked in Pitt County to maintain this annexation history. First of all, you want to plan to make it as usable as possible. So what kinds of attributes do you need to store? Some things that we used in Pitt County, we had a status thing where we had an ICL, OCL, or ANX. ICL is inside city limits, OCL is outside city limits, and ANX was annex. So if I had a property that's being annexed and they've adopted the ordinance last night at the city council meeting, but that ordinance doesn't go into effect until June 30th, I would not put it in the city limits yet. I would mark it as an annex and have an effective date on there. And that way I could easily pull up, okay, where are all the annexations that have been passed but are not yet effective? And our GIS office was able to pull those up and see when those were effective and change them over to an effective inside city limits situation when that date passed. And of course, if you are in a county, you're going to need to be tracking multiple municipalities. Most counties have more than one. So of course, knowing which municipality we're talking about is important. The key, though, and the thing that I always impress that is important that you need to know is that the ordinance number is kind of the key that ties everything together. You have this polygon, you have a document, you have a map, usually that ordinance number is something that can easily tie all those different things together. It's important that you know when that date of effective date is, because the effective date of an annexation is going to be important to different people. If you're looking at the Census Bureau, they have a particular date on which they look at for this year. If anything that's effective by this date. If you're talking about in the tax office, if something to be effective, when it's effective is going to be important as to how much property is going if it's going to be taxed for an entire fiscal year or if it's going to get a prorated bill. Those relevant documents, getting into that thing of knowing that there is an ordinance, it has been recorded, and a survey or map that have been recorded, and knowing that recording information. So if you're like, well, somebody comes in and questions when something was annexed, you've got information about, here's the ordinance where it was annexed, and here's the map, and here's all the information, and we can easily pull that from the Register of Deeds because we have that recording information. Another thing that you might track is whether or not it has been reported to the Secretary of State. Now, of course, this new tool will hopefully replace that process. And you could mark and whether or not this is one that you submitted to BAS this year or you've already submitted it previously. Those are different things that can be easily used to help you in your process. Here's where I was talking about that status. Symbolizing polygons by municipality is helpful. Now, I've seen some where you actually have this annexation polygon and then it gets merged in. In Pitt County, when we did that. So if you went to our public website or if you were in some other department and you just wanted to see city limits, you were gonna see the merged polygons. But in the tax office where we actually maintained these data and did the updates, instead of having a merged polygon, we actually had it broken up into all the different polygons, and that's where our history was maintained, and you could actually click on a polygon and know when it was annexed, what year, should they have gotten a tax bill in 2015? When was that effective? It's all answered by just clicking on it. When people don't need that, it's a lot easier to consolidate that and dissolve that into a single polygon for quicker display, things like that. But if you dissolve it and you don't keep that history, then it's lost. You did all that work for very little. And one of the things that I did when I was in Pitt County was I tried to go back when I would come across an annexation that was before they had started maintaining that annexation history. If I found an annexation, I would go in and split it out so we actually kept that history and somebody didn't have to look for it later. Sometimes it's easier to do for a smaller town. For the town of Winterville, I went back and got it all the way back to the earliest I could get was when I had they had a survey of their entire city limit, and then I had all the annexations since that point. The ordinance number, like I said, is a very good, unique identifier. It's important for different applications. The Census Bureau wants to know it. The Secretary of State wants to know it. Ideally, it's something that's actually on the ordinance itself. Sometimes we get ones submitted to us that don't have it, and we have to call and say, hey, is there an ordinance number? And they'll say yes, or they may tell us no, and we just have to kind of assign it by the date. Effective date, I talked about that. I'm kind of jumping ahead here. Recorded ordinance and the annexation map, that can be a standalone annexation map, or it can be a map attached to the ordinance. You can also have certain situations where it's just referencing an existing survey. The property was surveyed 10 years ago and now we're annexing it. It doesn't have to be a new survey of the property. Document stated annexation area is a useful thing to have. If you can compare, if the ordinance says you're annexing 32.05 acres and you calculated in the GIS and it's not the same or it's a considerable difference, that might be something where you have an area that needs to be remapped. So let's look at a couple of examples real quick from Pitt County. Went to the Register of Deeds and found all the ordinances recorded in that particular portion of a year. There were 4 of them. And I found the annexation maps for each of them. And so then I can go to the Secretary of State's office, and I can also search there for the annexations to see if they were recorded at the with the Secretary of State. So I can select Greenville from that list and find, oh, all 4 of them are right there. So they're good, the ordinances and the maps. And so we can find those ordinances and maps in both sites. Here's a quick example here, one that's a whole parcel that was being annexed. We took the entire parcel, we remapped it just to make sure that it was correct, selected that, and copied that parcel into the city limits layer, selecting which town, and then filling in all those different attribute information that I was talking about, and then it's done. And you can see there, each of the polygons is labeled. In this particular case, it's labeled with the book and page of the survey. Another example, we have an annexation of a split, so a portion of a property is being annexed. We did the mapping, created the new parcel, copy it into the city limits, and fill in all the attributes. And a last example, just to make it a little bit more difficult, this one here was an annexation of in a hole. And that hole was then splitting up a hole into 2 different holes. So we did the mapping, we created the parcel, and then copied it over into the city limits. Then, when we have the annexation tool, we select annexations, we select our town. We're going to go in and we're going to fill in all the information. On here, you note I've got the annexation or date removed from municipality. We're looking at changing the tool a little bit because there are specific things. De-annexations can only be done by the General Assembly, and so some of the questions that are normally required don't really necessarily apply for that. So we're looking at having a separate tool either for de-annexations or possibly for all legislatively executed annexations and de-annexations, because we've got those data. We follow the General Assembly, we get that data, but all it is the session law. What we don't have are any copies of any surveys that may exist, and we don't have a geospatial representation of that. So that's why we need that information from the locality. That was it. And then my contact information. So trying to rush through here because we were limited on time. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to reach out to me at the Secretary of State. Do I have any time for questions? Okay, any questions for me? Hopefully we got everything covered and everybody's happy. All right, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. It depends. Her question had to do with, she's from the county and certain things are submitted by municipalities. You know, it's going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In some places, it may make a lot more sense for the county just to do all of it. You know, if you're dealing with a town that doesn't have its own GIS office, how are they going to get a polygon, GIS polygon of their annexation area? It's probably going to be that they're going to record those documents at the Register of Deeds. You do your updates the way you normally would to update your thing, and you create that polygon. And the reason you know that it was updated or that it was annexed is because those documents have been recorded. So you have access that you can get the documents from the Register of Deeds, upload the documents, upload the shapefile or the geodatabase with that geometry. You know, it's not taking away any authority from anybody, but in a lot of cases, it's going to make a lot more sense for the county to do it if the county is the one who has GIS capabilities. If you're dealing with a big city that already has its own GIS office, then they may want to continue doing this themselves. It's really a case-by-case basis, and whatever works best for you is going to be what's best for the situation. All right, thank you very much.